Alright, hey guys, how's it going? It is me. It's, let's see, I'll bring myself down here just a little bit. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. There we go. Alrighty, so we are streaming wire transfer fraud comments and FSBO FSBO strategy, FSBO compensation strategy and requirements. Wow, compensation strategy and requirements. Watch here. Paste. Streaming wire transfer fraud comments and FSBO compensation strategy and requirements. Streaming wire transfer fraud comments and FSBO compensation strategy and requirements. Watch here. We'll capitalize FSBO and post. And there we go. All right, so Oscar posted this message here this morning, and I wanted to talk about it because it's critically important. Heartbreaking what happened to this family. Please speak to your clients that we, realtors, will never send them an email to transfer large sums of money. This could be avoided with proper communication. Please see article. And the article's right here. So, Boise family scammed out of $80,000 meant for a house down payment.
One week only. International.
Wowzers. A crook posed as the family's realtor for a week in order to steal the money that was meant for the down payment. A Boise family of 5 is now out $80,000 after a wire fraud scam targeted them while they were trying to buy a new home. It's just horrible. The Claytons were planning on spending this Christmas in a new home, but a crook ended up hacking their realtor's email and stole their down payment. So they live in their current home 17 years ago. They've outgrown the space. And now they can't buy the new home, and so they are going to stay in their existing home, essentially. So the Claytons were set to close on the deal on Friday, but the deal got pushed out to the following Monday. That's when we were communicated through a fraudulent email that posed as our realtor, saying that to line everything to close on Monday and get things to move quickly, here's the wire instructions. The amount matched with pre-closing documents, everything. The legitimate wire instructions came later, and then at that point they realized something was going bad, and it was too late though, because agents told Clayton that her $80,000 is gone and most likely out of the country by now, leaving her with little to no recourse to cover the money. So $80,000 just gone. It's horrible. Horrible. So here's an interesting timing on things. One thing is I had a email exchange. We had an Atova agent that was out of town last week, and so I was assisting the agent with closing their deal, and one of the things that I helped facilitate was the wire transfer instructions. And so here is an email that I sent to Deanna Curtis, who was who's a escrow officer out of town. So this is an escrow officer, I believe, from California. Our client is selling their California home with Deanna Curtis, the escrow officer in California, and then Cinda Pena is an escrow officer here in Idaho who is closing our client's purchase of the home here in Idaho. So this is the sale of our client's home in California and the purchase of our client's home here in Idaho. So these are both escrow officers. Deanna in California, Cinda here in Idaho. And so I had facilitated having Cinda, actually through her assistant Cameron, but Cinda, I contacted Cinda, the escrow officer here in Idaho, and asked Cinda to provide Deanna with a copy of the wire transfer instructions so that when our client's home sold in California, the escrow company in California could wire the proceeds to Pioneer Title here in Idaho to complete the transaction, because our clients are using the proceeds from the sale of their home as the down payment for the purchase of the home here in Idaho. So one thing I didn't want to do is, because of this fraud thing that exists out in the world, one thing I didn't want to do was just say, hey, Cinda, can you please send the wire instructions to Deanna and then call it a day. What I wanted to do is facilitate that and then also do a reality check, do a verification. So what I did was I asked Cinda to forward the wire instructions to Deanna and to me. So I had Cinda send the wire instructions to Deanna in California and to me. I then opened the wire transfer instructions that I got from Cinda, and I then called somebody that I know at the title company, Cami. So I have spoken with Cami Baldwin, a trusted source known personally to me at Pioneer Title. And I verified with Cami. I opened the attachment and I read her the routing number and I read her the account number. And Cami said, yes, those are correct. I then called and spoke with Deanna at Stewart Title in Sacramento, and I informed her that I just verified the information with Cami here in Idaho, and I asked her if she could please open the attachment as well. And when she had the attachment in front of her, I then read to her again the routing number and the account number, which I just confirmed with Cami, and confirmed that Deanna was in fact looking at the same information and had received the same information. So here I am sharing with everybody that I did that verification. Wire routing and account number information verified with Cami and verified as same as received by Deanna Curtis. So there was actually there was another recipient, which is the client's email address, which I've removed just for confidentiality purposes. But I included the client in this email exchange. And then finally I say, Deanna, please also make direct contact with Pioneer Title prior to issuing wire to triple confirm. So now what I'm asking her to do, I'm asking Deanna in Sacramento, I'm asking Deanna to also make contact directly with Pioneer to triple confirm. So it's I've confirmed with Pioneer. I've then confirmed with Stewart in Sacramento, and now I'm letting everybody know that I've made that confirmation, and I'm asking them again to confirm with each other. So I've confirmed, and I'm asking them to confirm with each other. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But you know what? Using this example, there's 80,000 reasons that it's worth it. Right? There's 80,000 reasons why it's worth it to do this little bit of extra work. Um, I think what you guys really should do is look at back last year. So if I go back to the dashboard here and I go to the broker daily history and I look for wire, you can see last year in August, wire fraud at close. So this was.
Morning, everybody. It is Thursday morning, about 8:30. She arrives. I'm trying to get buyers to wire their money to a different location. Buyers, scammers, fraud. Interesting post on the dashboard this morning about fraud in regards to.
So 54 seconds here. I want to go to stream from earlier this year that touches on this topic. And then there was also another one here.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Friday, about 10 o'clock, and just left Pioneer. I'm actually here in the Pioneer Title parking lot where they are. Interesting, actually. I had made some phone calls to different title companies to get more information on the fraud that's happening at the closing layer. I wanted to talk to Ted.
So this is actually from August of 2017, so a year and a half ago. A little bit less than a year and a half ago, we were talking about this pretty much when it first started happening. Back then, it was an escrow officer's email that had gotten hacked, and the story today was their agent's email got hacked. Ended up hacking their realtor's email. Yeah, so it's pretty much any trusted source, right? So they could be, if they hack the escrow officer's email, then they could send fraudulent wire instructions from the escrow officer's email. If they hack a realtor's email, then they could send fraudulent wire instructions from the realtor's email. So any trusted source is really a potential risk point. So, and then we have this second video here. This is actually not from earlier this year. This is from last year. So let's copy this. Stream from the middle of last year that touches on this topic, or that touched on this topic. Submit that. Get rid of the double post. And then we'll add this one. And the follow-up. Okay, so really what I want you guys to do is, I think there's two things that you should do. When you are probably the best time to do it would be when you get into escrow. So I think when you call the client and you tell them, hey, congratulations, they've accepted our offer. Or, hey, congratulations, they've accepted our counter offer. When that moment is happening, you're switching from negotiating, trying to get into contract, the excitement of that phase. You're switching from that phase to, now we're in escrow and we're going to be dealing with inspection and appraisal and your financing. When you call our client to tell them, congratulations, they've accepted our offer, I think there is a great opportunity for you to always remember to tell your clients that to educate the clients. Hey, just so you know, I know we're still early in this process, but I want to speak to you about it now because it's very important. there is examples where people are being defrauded out of large sums of money by scammers hacking title officers' email account or their agent's email account and then sending fraudulent wire transfer instructions. So as we get to the closing, if you get an email from me or an email from an escrow officer with wire instructions, make sure first you won't get wire instruction emails from me ever. So if you get wire instruction emails from me, that is a fraudulent thing for sure. Do not follow those instructions. I will not be sending you wire transfer instructions. The wire transfer instructions will come directly from the title company. Once you have received those wire transfer instructions, before you wire any money, it's very important that you verify that those instructions are in fact correct. You can do that, if you like, by forwarding the wire instructions to me, and I will make some phone calls and speak with people that I know are trusted sources at those title companies to verify that those wire instructions are correct. Or, if you prefer, you're welcome to call the title company yourself at a known good number. So look up the phone number online. Don't if the wire instructions contain a phone number in the email that says if you have any questions, call this number. Don't call that number. Don't call the number inside the wire instructions. Find a number to the main office and verify those wire transfer instructions independently with a known good phone number. So either send them to me and have me verify, or verify them yourself, but do not blindly follow wire instructions just because they appear to have come from a trusted source. You want to verify. One way or another, make sure that you verify before you send out any wires. And honestly, that's pretty much all it'll take is a little bit of education. Like Oscar says here, please speak to your clients. That's everything. So if you're silent on the matter, they're none the wiser, and therefore they're at risk of falling prey to these types of scams. But if you spend 20 seconds, 30 seconds talking to them about verify the wire instructions when you receive them. So one, I'll never send you wire instructions. If you receive any wire instructions from me or that appear to be from me, they're definitely fraudulent. Don't send any money. Call me with questions. If you receive wire instructions from a title company, odds are they're legitimate. But verify. Verify every time. Send them to me. Ask me to verify. Call a known good phone number and verify independently. One way or another, just double check. Have that conversation with your clients and save yourself and save your clients from this type of horrific crime. Let's see. I got a call over the weekend from an agent that had a buyer that wanted to write an offer on a FSBO property. And their question was, what documents do I need? How do I fill out the RE21? And there was a question on compensation as well. And I'll cover those things here. So, what documents do you need? So for a FSBO, for the seller, you need an RE21 and an agency brochure. Those are the things that you need to get the party started. For the buyer,
One week only. International designer Robert.
Sorry again. That was KTVB deciding to show me an ad. All right, buyer. For the buyer, same RE21, also an agency brochure, and a buyer rep. Buyer representation agreement. Okay, so then the transaction will also later need a, let's choose a color here. Let's go with purple. A property disclosure. So these are the docs that we need. When you, so the timing is interesting. So when you have a buyer that's interested in a FSBO property, really one of the first things that you want to make sure that you secure is compensation. Because with a property that is not listed in the MLS, you're not guaranteed any compensation. So when a property is put in the MLS, the reciprocity agreement that exists between brokerages applies. So if the MLS listing shows that the seller is offering 3% commission to a buyer, then to a buyer's agent, then that's what you'll get. You can depend on that. That doesn't exist with the FSBO. So you don't want to bring a FSBO an offer and then say, I'm assuming you're willing to pay me 3%, right? You don't want to take that for granted. Absolutely not. So what you want to do is get a compensation agreement. So the form is called compensation agreement with seller, and it is a simple one-page document in Instanet. I think we do have it here in our backup. Whoops. Compensation agreement with seller, the RE12. So it's really basic. The date, your name, the seller's name, which you can pull from the tax records if you don't have it. The address and the legal description goes here. Term of the agreement, you can just put 3 months. So from today to 3 months from now. Brokerage fee payable to a TOVA. Line 21. Seller agrees to pay a total brokerage fee of 3%. Is what you'll probably normally put here. 6% if you can get it. 4%, 4.5%, whatever. So that's a separate conversation, but usually 3% here. Or NA dollars. This lessee for lease section. So item B, you'll NA everything out in section B. Additional terms. Here's where you'll put for buyers John Smith and Sarah Smith only. And that's important because otherwise, if you don't limit it to your particular buyers, then technically, if the seller signs this agreement, they're agreeing to pay you a commission if the home sells during this term, regardless of who buys it. So by putting here, limited, or this agreement limited to John Smith and Sarah Smith only, by putting that here, you can show the seller that that's the first place I showed sellers. Back in the day, I would bring them a compensation agreement, and the first thing I would do is point right here to line 30 and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you can see right here that I have limited this agreement to John Smith and Sarah Smith only. So only if you're able to work a deal with my buyers will then you owe me a commission. This does not apply to anybody else. This is not a listing agreement or a broad compensation agreement. This compensation agreement is limited to these buyers only. And when you lead with that, it makes the sellers feel comfortable. They're like, okay, that's good. And down here is just the signature stuff. So one of the questions that we had was compensation here. So with this compensation question, um, one option is this RE12 compensation agreement with seller. That's an option that will protect you um, and get you paid. Another option would be to go ahead and provide the seller with representation. So you could do a seller representation agreement to give them agency and to make them a client. And you can do a seller representation agreement without a listing, and you can still limit that to a particular buyer. So, in the other terms and conditions of the seller representation agreement, you would say this agreement is limited to John Smith and Sarah Smith only. So, the same thing. So, compensation agreement with seller, this document, or a seller's representation agreement. Either way is okay. For a FSBO, you're generally going to want to limit that to the buyers that you're working with only, because that's probably the intention of the situation, right? You're not in most of these situations, you're not going to be trying to leverage this offer to get a listing at the same time. Uh, Certainly, if this offer doesn't work out, you'll use this as a jumping off point to try and get a listing, but you'll be coming back to that. You won't be doing it both at the same time. So, whether you're using a compensation agreement with seller form or a seller representation agreement form, either way, you'll likely be limiting it to your specific buyers only. If the deal works out, you get paid, wonderful. If the deal doesn't work out, then you can go to the seller and you can say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I expect that during the time that you've been on the market as a for sale by owner, that you've been approached by a few different agents, all asking you for your listing. But I would ask you, how many of those agents have actually brought you a buyer, right? And that's what sets me apart from everybody else that's asking you for a listing, is that I've actually done something. Now, it didn't work out in this particular instance, but if I've brought you one buyer, I can bring you another. So if you're going to consider listing with somebody, you should really, in my opinion, it makes sense to list with somebody that has actually done something for you. I've brought you a buyer, and the other people have just sent you mail. So you can, if the deal falls out, use that as a jumping off point to have that conversation. And at that juncture, if you can come to an agreement, you would then present another seller representation agreement with 6% commission and omitting the language that limits it to the one buyer only, because now it's a general listing. So you do a new seller rep at that time. Part of that conversation was that the seller was, like a lot of FSBOs, reluctant to list their property. They didn't want to pay a full commission, and so my advice to the agent was, write this offer, try and get yourself a deal. If you can, great. If you can't, try and get the listing afterwards. When you try and get the listing, talk about how you brought them a buyer. And other agents are just saying, hey, give me your listing, give me your listing. I've actually brought you a buyer. I can bring you another. List with me. I'll take great care of you. The agent said, yeah, but he's really reluctant. And I said, tell the seller that they control the bottom line. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you have for the Smith family, you agreed to pay me 3% if you were able to work out a deal for them. The other 3% that's required for a listing, you can add that onto your list price. So if you're already willing to pay me 3%, and we can add 3% onto our list price, then going on the market isn't going to cost you a penny more than you were already planning on. So if it costs nothing to get on the market, and you can increase your market exposure, why would you not do that, right? So if you can preserve your bottom line and at the same time vastly increase your market exposure, that's something that I think is worth considering. Um, Now, a counter perspective, the seller might come back and say, "Yeah, that's true. We could raise our price 3% to offset the fact that we're going to have to pay a buyer's agent 3%. But I've already been trying to sell my home as a for sale by owner for the past, 60 days at this price, and I haven't had any success. And now you want me to actually raise my price? That doesn't make any sense. So if I haven't been able to sell my home at this price, what makes you think that we're going to be able to sell it if I actually start asking more?" And the answer to that question is market reach. So you have when you're on the market as a for sale by owner, your market reach is very limited. You don't get exposure to the entire buyer pool when you're a for sale by owner. You just don't. You're not out there as much as you need to be. If you list with me, your market reach will expand by 100-fold. And so, yes, it's true that the purchase price has been increased, or the asking price has been increased incrementally, but this tiny increase in purchase price is way more than compensated from the fact that we have this expanded market reach. So, yeah, tiny purchase price increase, that is a negative, but it's more than offset by the huge value that we get in expanded market reach. So if we can get on the market without without decreasing your bottom line, and we can increase that market reach, it's definitely something that's worth considering. All right, so that's that conversation. In this particular instance, the agent had asked me, or I think I brought it up, because the questions initially were, what documents do I need? And then I brought up the compensation question, and then the agent responded to me and said, "Well, I have a text message from the seller that says they'll pay 3%. Is that enough?" And that takes us to this compensation question. So, one option for compensation agreement with seller document, limited to your specific buyers. Second option to secure your compensation, a seller representation agreement, limited to your buyers. Third option, certainly, a text message is fine. Idaho law does consider electronic correspondence to be written correspondence, so anything that you capture in writing via a text message can be considered binding. But the question that we had was, the text message was something like, I think it was, "I will pay 3% if I'm able to work a deal with your buyer." It was something to that effect that we got from the seller. And that's not bad. I guess it is bad. It is actually very bad. It's bad for a couple of reasons. The first reason is 3% of what is not defined, right? So is it 3% of the closing costs? Is it 3% of my mortgage payment? The seller could come back later and make up anything they wanted to because it's undefined. So it's also bad because if I'm able to work a deal, arguably, if we get into contract, we could say that you worked a deal and we want to get paid now. So it's not tied to closing. So that's bad for them. So this language is not great. I would rather see something like this. So you should control the language. So, and you can make me the bad cop. So you could tell the person on the phone, hey, I normally would be happy just to work on a handshake, but my brokerage requires that I secure something in writing. I'll send you a text message in 5 minutes or so. Reply back to that text message with your approval, and then I will be happy to take my buyer out, look at the property, and hopefully bring you an offer. So the text message that you would send would say something like, please reply to confirm your agreement to pay 3% of the sale price of for if my buyers John and Sarah Smith successfully close on the sale of your home at 1234 street name, city, state, zip. All right, let's see. Please reply to confirm. Let's say that you agree. There we go. Please reply to confirm that you agree to pay 3% of the sales price if my buyers John and Sarah Smith successfully close on the sale of your home at 1234 street name, city, state, zip. Perfect. So you then get a reply back from them that says, yes, I agree. Then I think that this setup here is satisfactory. So compensation with a FSBO, making sure that you get paid. You either need a compensation agreement with seller document, this guy right here, or a seller representation agreement, or a text message like this. Now, ultimately, I would say that the RE12 compensation agreement with seller is the best, safest way to proceed. However, it's not always the most streamlined way to do it. Because if this is arguably adequate and can be obtained easier and more quickly, then in a FSBO situation, this might be the way to go, because you're trying to secure your compensation. And if you choose this path, which is sending them a document that has, paragraphs worth of language and requires them to sign it and get it back to you, that's a more complicated, more laborious process. And so I think that this text message approach can get you the same result faster. And so this is what the situation that the Atova agent was in over the weekend. This is the path that we chose. And I believe is perfectly acceptable. Just make sure that you get the wording correct so that there can be no room for silliness on behalf of the seller later. Okay, so that's the compensation part. How to fill out the RE21 part. So the RE21 part's pretty easy. Let's open up an RE21. So with a for sale by owner, the transaction is largely the same. The listing agency section here, there is, the listing agency section, there we go. The property is not listed. Therefore, the listing agency section should be NA'd out. So lines 2 and 3 would be all NA. Everything else in the offer is going to be normal, with the exception of agency. Assuming that you are only using the text message approach to compensation, or doing the compensation agreement with seller form, those two forms don't create, or those two methods don't create agency. Chicago, Illinois. Hello, this is Steve. Hey, I'm doing good. I'm actually on a live stream right now. Could you buzz me back in a couple of hours? All right, thanks. That was just a sales call. Okay, so so if you're using the text message method or compensation agreement with seller method, those do not create agency. If you're using a seller representation agreement document as your method, then that does create agency. So if you use either of the first two methods, you're going to want to make sure that you're checking box number one or section number one here, A, because you're going to be working with your buyer, assuming that you've signed a buyer rep, you're going to be working with your buyer as a client. There's agency. With the seller, you're going to want to check D, because unless you've done a seller representation agreement, if you've only used the text message approach or the compensation agreement with seller approach, there is no agency, and therefore you would check D for that box. So, and that's it. That's really it. So other than NAing out lines 2 and 3 and making sure that you get agency right here, A and D most commonly, everything else in the agreement is going to be the same. Property disclosure, though, property disclosure is something that is often missed with a FSBO. We catch it, but it's a document where you're representing the buyer. Usually, it's the listing agent that gives the property disclosure to the seller to fill out, but there is no listing agent in this transaction, and so therefore the property disclosure sometimes gets forgotten. So you certainly can, if you elect to do so, you can do the property disclosure at the same time you're sending over the purchase and sale agreement and the agency brochure, which, by the way, please make sure that you always send over the agency brochure at the same time that you're sending over the purchase and sale agreement, if not before. This is really the last time where it's okay. So make sure that you're sending over an agency brochure with the RE21 when you're sending it to the seller. So give the seller the blue brochure at the same time that you're giving them the offer, or at least never later than that. Okay to give it to them earlier, but never later than the moment that you're giving them the offer. Do we also want to give them the property disclosure form at the same time? Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's the offer, here's the agency brochure, and here's the property disclosure form that I need you to fill out. That's required, whether you're a FSBO or not. The property disclosure is a document that's required by Idaho law. I would recommend that you not deliver the property disclosure at this time. I would recommend that you only deliver to the seller the RE21, assuming that you did. Let's see who this is. Hello, this is Steve. I'm actually on a live stream right now, but if you want to buzz me back in a couple of hours. All right, thanks. somebody from Cambridge Telephone Company. Also sounded like a solicitation, so I think we're good there. If you're using the text message approach, you don't need this document. You don't need the compensation agreement with seller. So if you use the text message approach to secure compensation, then when you initially submit the offer to the seller, these are the two documents that you'll send over. For the buyer, when you're writing the offer, these are the documents that you'll have them sign. Then, after you get into a contract, then I would send this over to the seller. I would say, hey, congratulations. I'll open up escrow tomorrow morning. In the interim, I just sent you a document. It's the property disclosure. This is not a realtor required form. This is an Idaho law required form. So whether you had sold your home as a FSBO without me or with me, either way, Idaho law requires that this form be filled out. So I send it to you. It's in your email. Please fill it out when you can. And of course, let me know if you have any questions. So I would just do this document after to keep it simple, right? Because we're trying to get a deal together, and the less paperwork that we have to deal with while we're trying to get that deal together, the better. So let's do the minimum that we need to while we're trying to get into contract. And then once we've gotten into contract, we can switch things up and begin to do some house cleaning. So what documents? We covered that. How to fill out the RE21, we covered that. And compensation, we covered that as well. All right, guys, that's it for now. I'm going to be streaming again in a couple of hours. I've got a bunch of different stuff to do, so I'll include you in that. And we'll talk soon. All right, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.